Hello, Pushali. Nice to see you, buddy. Sorry, I'm just setting up live streaming to YouTube as well for some of our friends today as well. So I'm just setting up a few things. So I'll turn the microphone off just for a second, guys, and get set up. Yeah. Apologies. Hi to my friends in YouTube. Excuse me, guys. I'm just setting a few things up. I'll just turn the audio off and get everything set up so we can kick off on time. Nice to see you all. Nice to see everybody as usual. Excuse me for 1 second. Hi, Nin. Yeah, just getting set up, Nin. Caster, the topic for today is speaking, my friend. Every Wednesday when you join for free, it will be speaking. Okay, at the moment, Jay and I have got a regular schedule. So Wednesday is always speaking day, if you like. Hi, everybody. Hi in OET E2 Zoom land. Hi, Remitha. Hi, Nin. Hi, Pushali. Nice to see you. Hello out there in YouTube land, if that's the phrase. Couple of questions. Writing is always on Thursdays and Fridays, Caster. Okay. Hi, Annie. I'm a little bit early today, so that's good, isn't it? I guess I can answer a couple of questions. Sorry, is what from E2 language? Everything is from E2 language, yeah? Writing, you have to have a subscription though, yeah? Or to be a member, excuse me, of E2 to join the other live classes. On Wednesdays, we do free classes just for everybody's benefit, I guess, okay? And it will, at the moment, the way it's organized, everything, it will always be speaking on Wednesdays. Yeah, no, I haven't got my video on yet, Nick. Okay. Oh, good ones. Good ones. I'm glad you like the website. It's nice, isn't it? Hello, everybody. Luigi's here. Hi, Luigi. Nice to see you, buddy. Hi, Ibrahim. Annie, did I say hi to you? I did, didn't I? All right. Let me just keep an eye on the time. Yeah, I always do. I don't want to surprise you all too soon. Yeah. Hi, Pam. Welcome, my friend. It's nice to have you. Always cool to have people for the first time. Hi, Mezabine. Nice to see you as well. I hope I said your name well. Hello, Shwan. I'm well, thank you, mate. I'm not too bad at all. Oh, Alexander, that's a great question. So let me just quickly speak to everybody, but I'll speak to my friends in YouTube. Guys, there's going to be quite a lot of you, usually about 150 or so. So I will try to find time periodically to get to your questions in the chat. But obviously, I am dealing with two sets of chat here. One for my friends who have got E2 subscriptions who come to most classes because we have them every day. And of course, today on Wednesdays, we do a free live streaming class for you guys, for your benefit, okay, as I said. So I will always try to find a little bit of time, okay? But please don't be sad and offended if I can't get to your questions, okay? There are a couple of useful questions that have just come up. So Caster asked when writing is. If you are a subscriber to the E2 service, writing is always on Thursdays and Fridays. On Thursdays, we look at case notes for nursing, and on Fridays we look at case notes for medicine. Okay, there was one or two other useful questions. Alexander John de Vega has asked about the previous speaking part as opposed to the 2.0 part. We'll talk a little bit about that today, Alexander, and I'll just reference the few little changes. The changes are not in the task, Alexander, they are in the way that you are just rated in your performance, okay? Alrighty. J.R. Lakshmi, the center is online, so you have to go to e2language.com. It's a website, and then you'll get all the information you need about the various subscriptions and services they have. Alrighty, hi, Dr. Samuel. Hi, Geeta. Hi, Nabil. Nice to see you. Saeed. Hi. Hi, everybody. Cicera, nice to see you as well. Ricardo is here. All right. Actually, I can't remember. Mezabin. Does the budget package give access to all the live classes? I think maybe it does. I don't think it gives access to things like one-to-one tutorials and stuff like that, yeah? Then you're at, hi Avni, nice to see you, sorry. And then you're asking about which OET course, sorry. Which OET course are you asking about? Nin has asked about whether or not the OET course is government approved in Australia. You mean this one we're doing? You mean the E2 course, Nin? No, currently there are no government approved ones. Unlike, for example, the National Health Service in UK, that has a nice course, I think, for nurses, yeah? Okay. The government actually doesn't take any responsibility for this. It's the receiving organizations and the receiving institutions, yeah? Hi, Carito, nice to see you, buddy. All right, guys, let's kick off. Thank you, Cyprian and Nin have clarified that. If you have a budget subscription, this is useful for everybody. Okay, if you have a budget subscription to E2, you get access to all of these live classes that Jay and I do, and but you don't get access to one-to-one tutorials, which is probably just about the most useful thing to do with writing and speaking, actually, to be perfectly honest. Okay, hi Jenny, hi Roma, hi Cyprian, nice to see you. All righty, guys, let's kick off if you don't mind. All right, my friends, nice to have everybody here on YouTube, as well as my my regular participants here in E2, of course. Hi, Hiba. All right, let's have a look at OET Speaking and get into it. I don't want to drag on too much. Sorry, a couple of the guys on YouTube are asking where we're based. We are in Melbourne. Okay, E2 Language is situated in Melbourne. Nick, you probably thought that I was in New Zealand because I am a New Zealander. Sometimes I teach from New Zealand, but E2 Language is an online language school situated in Melbourne, Australia. Okay. All righty. Good. Jenny, I'll talk at the end about when I'm available for tutorials. Okay. All right, let's go. Okie dokie, so here's a little spruik for E2 Language anyway. One of the things that you get when you, well, actually, let me turn my video on so you can see me, and I'll do it like an advertisement. Hello, everybody, here I am. I'm Craig, I'm one of the E2 OET language teachers. Together, Jay and I, at different times of the day, do live classes every day. Okay, one of the other things that E2 does, which I think is wonderful, particularly for your speaking and writing, but in general, it's wonderful actually for any of the skills, is we offer one-to-one tutorials. And so if you see my face here, you can imagine that what you do is you book a time with a person like myself or one of our many other wonderful OET teachers, and you are able to do practice speaking tasks, for example, and receive very direct and quite powerful feedback on your performance, the descriptors, as we call them, which are the things that are used to rate your performance. Okay, you can see Jay, my good buddy Jay, has put a little star down there that says 99.3% would recommend a tutorial to a friend. So Jay's been on a little bit of a survey drive. Now that is a very, very useful piece of information, but as a 20-year veteran of teaching in general, but also an applied linguist, I would just recommend that direct feedback with somebody who knows what they're talking about, like one of our E2 teachers, is extremely powerful for both speaking and writing, okay? It can also help quite significantly with your performance and in the listening and reading aspects of the test as well, yeah? So if you have a subscription or you are considering subscribing further, all you need to do is go to your E2 account, log in, and you will see the upgrade button in your, what we call your dashboard, the thing that you see when you log in. There is an upgrade button there if you want to upgrade so that you can get one-to-one tutorials. I recommend it. I think it's very powerful, particularly for those of you who might be doing the test next Saturday on the 23rd, excuse me, or 22nd if you're in Canada. Actually, that's right, isn't it, Samuel? Yeah. All right. So there we go. Consider it. It's very, very useful, and yeah, you get the benefit of spending some face-to-face time with somebody like myself, giving you some direct, powerful feedback on your speaking. Okay. Highly recommended. Really nice way to improve, particularly in the short term with the test eve coming. Yeah. All righty. So we've got some new students. So as always, we want to have a little chat about the general aspects of the task. Okie dokie. So let's have a little look at it, my friends. The speaking task hasn't changed. Okay. So this aspect of it is the same. What has changed is something we'll talk about in a minute. So basically, when you walk in, the first thing that happens is apart from they say hello, of course, they begin to record the entire 20 minutes of the test, excuse me. After that, they of course check your identity, and then you have what is called a warm-up conversation, where they ask you a routine set of questions about your specialization, your plans, etc. Okay. The idea is that this is for you to warm up, to get relaxed, feel a little bit more comfortable about the role plays to come. Okay. It's not assessed. All right. So it's not part of the audio recording that is listened to by the rater. Let me clarify that, because the person you are speaking to, which we call technically the interlocutor, probably easier to just think about them as the person you are speaking to, doesn't rate your performance anyway. Okay. The reason it is recorded is because after the test, after you've done the test, it goes separately to 2 independent raters who listen back to the role play parts of your performance and rate them according to what we call the descriptors, the criteria for the OET speaking test. Okay, so the interlocutor is there to help you. They're there to a certain extent guide you and perform in the task with you. Okay, so use that time in the conversation to get used to their accent, to try to create as friendly a relationship as you can in that short term. Okay, right. After that, of course, you do have to do 2 distinct role plays, and as soon as that 5 minutes is up, and you don't control the time at all, the interlocutor controls the time. So apart from being there to talk with you, they're there to manage the whole test. All right. So as much as it's possible, guys, I recommend you just let the timing out of your mind. You don't have any control over it. Even if you thought you had a watch and you were timing 5 minutes, etc., it wouldn't matter. The interlocutor is the person who decides, according to their own timer, when that 5 minutes is up and when the time for the first role play will begin. Okay. Right. So once the first role play begins, you receive a card, a role card is what it's technically known as, I guess. And of course, as I hope most of you are aware, but we'll see one today anyway, if you're unfamiliar with it, you are given a context, a situation that you are talking to a patient in. Okay. So you have this card, and it has information about the role play related to your profession. Okay. So these are profession specific, and there are currently 12 professions that OET purports to test. Okay. You will have 2 to 3 minutes to prepare before you're asked to start the role play. Okay. And the preparation time is very, very important, very useful again and again. Not really your responsibility to think about the time so much, but to think about the card and your activity and what you're to do. Okay. So that time begins when the interlocutor says. It also ends when the interlocutor says. And at that time, at the end of the 2 to 3 minutes, they will ask you to begin the role play. And that is your time to show what you can do in general. Okay. And this whole sequence is repeated. All right. So at the end of 5 minutes of you talking through the role card and talking with the interlocutor, I stress with the interlocutor, the whole sequence of planning and a second role play is performed. This is to give you, in a sense, 2 opportunities to show what you can do, perhaps a slightly wider range of contexts and language, yeah? Okay, so that's the test in its own right, yeah? I'll just quickly check the chat to make sure that I haven't missed anything, okay? Oh, good. So Carito has just supported the fact that the one-to-one tutorial is very good for confidence and a useful learning experience. Thank you, Carito. It's very kind of you, mate. And it's really good for your peers, both inside E2 and also on YouTube, to hear a personal account of how useful a one-to-one tutorial is. And I agree, as you know, yeah? Not just because I do them, but because I've been part of them for a long, long time. Okay, so that's the basic part of the test. That part hasn't changed from the earliest version, OET 1.0, as it's sometimes known, to OET 2.0, as we call the new version. We've actually just changed it to calling it OET now, but okay, one of the people in YouTube asked, I can't think it was Alex perhaps asked, and it's a good question. But this part hasn't changed. The cards haven't changed really either. Okay, so what is it? Here's where I like to actually kind of highlight the things that you already know. Now, everybody here, whether you're in my ordinary E2 live class or on YouTube, is a highly trained professional, okay? And the thing that I'd like you to remember about this task is that it's a simulation of the types of situations you guys, all of you here watching me today, might find yourself in the real world, okay? Now, this should be empowering and useful for you. I don't want you to think about it in terms of not being able to do it. The first place I'd like you to start in your own preparation is, how would I normally behave with my language and, of course, in general, in my behavior in a context like what is on the role card, okay? This allows you to bring your social skills, your technical training, of course, and I don't mean medical training, I mean medical communication training, and of course, more importantly, or most importantly, excuse me, your language, okay? OET doesn't have an expectation of a perfect model of how these role plays go, okay? You're not compared to anybody else's performance. The card is well understood. Your performance is evaluated according to what was on the card and how you interact with the person you're speaking to, the interlocutor, okay? So those are the expectations. So I want you to not really have in your sense a model of perfect language performance here, but to think about how you would normally do it, what you can already do, and of course, how you might improve your language resources to do better in the task, yeah? Okay, so I use a quote to point this out. So this is from actual medical communication training, not from language teachers or OET, etc. And it really, for me, highlights what I think are the central points of the changes from 1.0 to 2.0 OET. So the 3 main goals of current professional patient communication, professional as you guys, patient, I guess, as people like me or the interlocutor in this case, are creating a good interpersonal relationship. That's extremely important in the new version of the OET descriptors, okay? They use terms like rapport, empathy, okay? These are fundamental. They're not so much language skills as interpersonal communication skills, all right? Facilitating exchange of information, information giving and information gathering, okay? Today, we're going to look at a little subset of information giving, actually, explanation and description. All right, this is asking questions, answering questions, providing explanations, okay, just as you would. There's none of you here that if you were speaking to, shall I say, a real patient or a real client in your actual professional environment, where you would want them to not know things they need to know or to misunderstand, okay? That doesn't change in the OET speaking test. The only difference is that it isn't at that top end real. My advice still is to try to treat it as much as possible like it is real. And then finally, including patients in decision-making, okay? And when we use term in English, we call this being patient-centered. It's not really an English medical concept. It's rather a worldwide medical concept now, where the patient somehow is actually actively involved in their treatment, including having opinions, understandings, etc. And the medical practitioner, whatever the field is trying to include them as much as possible. Possibly in the past, it's debatable whether this is actually true, but possibly in the past, a lot of medicine, a little bit like teaching actually, was seen as simply passing information on to a fairly passive vessel. In the old way of thinking about teaching, a person like myself stood in the front, told everybody what to do. You either got it or you didn't get it, right? Possibly in the old model of medicine, you guys knew a great deal more about it than patients, and so you simply told them what to do, what they needed to do, and they sat there and said nothing. Okay. The new mode is much more communicative, much more inclusive, and as I said, patient-centered. Okay. Again, I hope this reminds you to some extent of the things that you saw and learned when you were training, and of course the things that you value in your actual professional experience. Yeah. And this is from J.F. Ha and N. Lomnecker, who are leaders in the field of doctor-patient communication skills. Okay, they're doctors actually. Okay, so I like to point that out. In many instances, most of you know what to do. You may have language things to work on, of course, and that's what we're here for. How we're scored. Now, this really defines, to some extent, the changes from OET 1.0 to OET 2.0. Sorry, tongue twister. These ones haven't changed, though, and we'll go through them pretty quickly. So you're scored against language criteria, linguistic criteria, if you like. You're scored against intelligibility, which ultimately comes down to clarity and pronunciation. Okay, fluency, which is primarily about speed, etc., and of your language. Appropriateness, which is using the right type of language for the given context you find yourself in. And then, of course, most familiar to most of you, I think, and most people think about language in terms of grammar and expression. Expression here really, I guess, means vocabulary or word or phrase selections, okay? These things are all related in your performance, of course. They are divided up for rating, but of course, when we speak, my intelligibility, fluency, appropriateness, grammar, and expression are collapsed into my actual speech, right? Probably most useful for you to think about that. When you get feedback, for example, in a one-to-one tutorial from E2 or from any teacher, they might talk about any one of these things, yeah? And that can be useful, all right? But when we actually speak, this is a holistic sense. Each of these is scored out of 6, so linguistic criteria are weighted slightly more, okay? Here's a slightly extended description of what these criteria mean. Intelligibility is about how clearly you can be understood, okay? So it refers to pronunciation, intonation, stress, rhythm, and accent. These are technical concepts, okay? But ultimately, again, it's about clarity, you can see. All right, we all have accents. We all have accents which, in a sense, betray where we are from. It's a big part of our identity. There's no expectation of OET that you don't have an accent. What they want is understandability. The person you're speaking to knew what you said, was able to understand that the conversation could continue, okay? All right, so don't misunderstand this as meaning you have to sound like, I don't know, a native English speaker or whatever. There is no set English accent anymore. I'm a Kiwi. Many people in the English speaking world would think that I sound a little bit odd, but can they understand me? Most of the time, yeah? Fluency is about your rate or speed or the flow of your speech, yeah? Okay. It has as much to do with pausing as not speaking too fast. Okay, so if you pause in unusual places where your meaning becomes clouded because you've interrupted your meaning unit, this can be very, very difficult. You can also speak too slowly, which has the same effect, right? So when we say speed, we don't just mean too fast. We mean a variety of kind of patterns which interrupt what we call meaning units, the things that actually form an understanding in our listener's head. Appropriateness, interesting concept, and it's about using suitable professional language, okay? Professional language is neither highly formal nor can it be informal. It's somewhere in the middle, actually, slightly towards formality, okay? It's cautious, it's clear, and it's highly communicative in the sense, particularly in medicine, that we want the people we're speaking to understand clearly what's wrong with them, what's happening to them, what we're going to do about it, okay? Obviously, one of the things that gets highlighted a lot, and I think is important, each of you has a great deal of very technical knowledge. You've trained for years, and obviously your actual experience has brought another level of knowledge as well. Clearly, you can't communicate in the way that you might with a fellow expert with a patient, okay? Because they sit there and they say, well, I didn't go to university for 6 or 7 years, nor did I do a specialization in a hospital or in a clinic or whatever. So you have to be able to speak in a way that everybody understands it, okay? It's not just word, not just jargon or technical terms, but in a way that allows you to say things more than once, okay? Again, there's a good analogy with teaching. Quite often teachers can explain something and all the students just go, I don't know what you're talking about, okay? Good teachers will actually be responsive to that, and they'll try to explain it with an example, they'll try to relate it to the real world, and they will, of course, ultimately explain the same thing several times, okay? At different levels of complexity, so that they can be as sure as anyone can be that everything has been understood, okay? So that's a lot of what it's about. It's also about understanding who it is you're speaking to and the way that they speak, okay? Best example probably, or the most obvious example, is most of us here are adults. So we could probably speak to each other in a fairly standardized way. If we were speaking to young teenagers from our own community, we may change our language slightly because their experience and their expectations are different. Of course, if we're speaking to an elderly person, one of the good things about the world is that we typically respect the elderly. So we speak a little bit more gently, we speak a little bit more politely typically. These are the sorts of things that I mean by appropriateness here, okay? We don't speak the same way to everybody, all right? And that is actually interlinguistic, okay? There are ways that we modify it. We don't even notice it half of the time. But here, you guys, you need to think about it, all right? In the context of the role play, if you're speaking to an elderly person, you might speak slightly differently. If you're speaking to a young child or the parent of a child, you may modify your language, yeah? Okay. Ages and backgrounds is the point, yes? Educated people, uneducated, or less educated, excuse me. Okay, grammar and expressions about your ability to use a range, and the key word here is range, okay? Okay, Venkatesh, I'll take that question up in a second, buddy, okay? And the range here, so you're not trying to speak too simply, nor are you trying to speak in an over complex manner. Okay, speech is, of course, in its nature, less complex than written grammar, for example. Okay, these two things actually quite naturally relate to each other, and you can think about it. You may display a different range of vocab when you're speaking to parents and young people or older people, right? You might naturally think, I'm going to speak in a slightly different way, therefore you demonstrate your range. Remember, you have two role plays. So you may, in fact, have the capacity to show a range simply because the person you are speaking to in both the role plays is different, okay? And it's a good way to think about it. You have a double opportunity to show the variety of language you can use. Okay, got a couple of questions here, actually. So I've got Venkatesh said, before the beginning of the second role play, should we ask the name again, or with the second role play, can we continue? Yeah, you can use the same name, actually, Venkatesh. It's a nice question, mate. The interlocutor gets given a role card, and who they are, in some sense, changes. So in one, they might be a patient. In the second, they could be an anxious parent. We never know. Okay, but their name's not going to change. They're still going to be a man or a woman, depending on their gender in there, and just use the same name. It's a nice question, buddy, actually. Good question. Shining Star has got a question. Actually, it's famous. You should be fluent in speaking. I wonder if we speak like this fluent to a patient without repeating and pauses, how they will understanding in real practice. Fluency doesn't mean no pauses, okay? Fluency means pausing at the right time when a meaning unit, okay? Let me think about pausing for a second. We're not going to practice it today. We've got some lessons in the E2 set about it. One of the ways to think about pausing is think about it like punctuation in writing. We often have a full stop or a comma because we actually want one idea to be finished before a new one begins, okay? Pausing has a very similar function in speaking, okay? I just paused because I said pausing has a very similar function in speaking, okay? It's like a full stop. Breathe, new idea, okay? That's one of the ideas. If you pause in the wrong place, people become confused rapidly, all right? It's very technical, but don't equate it with speed. All righty, so I'm going to turn the video off in a second, guys. We're going to do a we're going to do an activity, and we're going to work around the idea of intelligibility. And in fact, we're going to focus in here on one aspect of stress. Let me just quickly highlight for you guys. These activities, there's a sense where we can't teach you stress, okay? We can model it. We can show you what it looks like. We can make you aware of it. The activities that we practice here in the live class are of that third kind, awareness, or actually technically what we would call them consciousness raising. If I show you an example and we do some activities together, the thought is that when you go into the English speaking world, or you listen to a podcast or watch something on the television to practice, or speak with your friends to practice, the awareness that you might gain from my activity here gets carried into the real world. You think to yourself, oh, I'm going to stress the most important word here so that my friend gets a sense of my message. Or perhaps even better, you notice it in other people. You think, oh, every time Craig speaks, every time he wants to hit one word, he says it slightly longer, slightly louder, and that's because it's significant, okay? So these are consciousness raising tasks, yeah? One-to-one feedback over an extended period of time, we could in fact teach it, because I could just feed back to you every time the stress or causing was slightly unusual or confusing. Okay, but I just want to highlight that, all right? It's important for you guys to give yourselves the chance to digest this stuff and carry some of these lessons away with you for when you get what we would call input, or when you hear language and when you speak, okay? It's very, very important and not easy. Okay, so give yourself a break as well, yeah? All righty, so I'll just check the chat. Okay, well, let me take up a couple of good questions here, guys. Jasmine has asked a really nice question, yeah? Hello to my friends who said hi as well. Jasmine has said, let me just say the question because it's a good question, Jasmine. What if the interlocutor is a man and the task stated the person is a lady? Well, actually they don't, right? In many instances, what they do is they say man or lady, or they say father or mother, okay? So basically the role plays are non-gender specific depending on who the interlocutor is, okay? So they will use a word like patient, for example, and whoever is sitting in front of you, Jasmine, whether it be man or woman, is the patient, okay? So you're not really ever put into a peculiar situation where you're thinking, gee, this says that I'm talking to an elderly woman when I'm speaking to a man, okay? The only thing that might change is the age. So you might be speaking to a person of my age, you know, middle-aged, but actually it might state in your role card that the person is elderly. So you will have to change their age in your mind, but you don't have to change their gender, okay? It's a nice question though, Jasmine, because it can be a little bit unclear, yeah? But you're not asked to pretend that a man is a woman or vice versa, okay? No, Eduardo, you can't change your natural flow of speech. You can't change your accent in the natural flow of speech. Adjusting the flow of speech is about making sure that your meaning is clear. So you pause between one idea and another, okay? We call them meaning units because, of course, in speaking, we don't have punctuation and full stops and capital letters and things, yeah? And they're not sentences either. They're slightly different. Yes. So Carito has asked a very good question, and it's fundamental. The interlocutor will act as our patient and they will interact with you. So the interlocutor also has a role card, which is like yours, but tells them who they are and what is wrong with them, etc. Okay. The whole purpose of the task is to speak with the interlocutor. Okay. No, Carito, you don't. You don't need to do all the talking. In fact, you need to do a lot of listening as well. Carito, can you remember the active listening tasks we did a few weeks ago? Okay, so the rub of this whole task, my friends, is about having as real a conversation with the interlocutor as you can. Okay, and the word conversation is quite a useful idea here, right? Okay, so you are in fact speaking to somebody. You must keep eye contact. You shouldn't just be reading the card, etc. You should be using the card to remind you of some aspects of what you need to do to perform the task, okay? But primarily, meaning mostly, you are watching, listening, speaking to the interlocutor. Okay, yeah, Hiba, you have the card with you at all times. Okay, it's in front of you on the desk. Okay, you can even hold it in your hand if that makes you feel better, as long as you don't put too much of your attention just on the card. All right. In a real conversation with a real patient, you would be keeping eye contact, you would be asking them questions, allowing them to answer, etc. Yeah. Yeah, Carito, can I actually this is a really good point, guys. Very, very interesting point. Carito has suggested that you should do most of the talking because you'll get a good mark. But I just want you to think about that in terms of the real world. If a patient walks in and says, "Oh, doctor, I'm feeling a bit sick," and then you do all the talking, you run the risk of not knowing what's wrong with them or getting a lot of information, yeah? Or the information you need. So no, it's a little bit like a balance, yeah? And I'll say this at the end. You need to balance speaking and listening, yeah? Because some of the things the interlocutor says will be very, very helpful. So when you ask them a question and they answer, the best thing for you to do is to respond to what they say, not to say, "Oh, okay, now I'm just going to talk about what it says on the card." All right. That would be fatal, actually. All right. So as much as you can treat it like a real consultation or a real medical conversation, if you like, the best. Yeah. Okay. So you are listening nearly as much as you are talking. But Carito, you are right to the extent that, so let's think about this, guys. When somebody walks in and they say, "Doctor, I have a sore stomach," or "Nurse, I've hurt my leg," or, "Oh," talking to a physiotherapist saying, "Look, the muscle at the back of my ankle is just kind of feeling a bit sore." Clearly, most of you will want to ask another question. Okay, you want to say, "Oh, can you tell me how sore is it?" Or "Tell me exactly where it is," or "Can you tell me, did you have an accident," etc. There'll be multiple very natural questions will arise. You must ask those questions, okay? And what that means, Carito, for your question is that if you ask a question, you expect an answer, okay? So you're going to have to let them speak, all right? And in fact, it would be very impolite if you didn't, yeah? So you have a lot of things to manage here. Okay, so that's the way to think about it. And that's why I say to you, try to be as authentic or realistic as possible. Yes, Cicera, in the second role play, you need to do what the context asks you to do. Okay, so if you've never met the patient in the second context, it's a different context. Okay, so you don't get it's not a continuation of the previous role play. So if you get a sense that you don't know the patient in the second role play, absolutely, you will have to introduce yourself. Okay, all right. Chris has asked, does eye contact really matter since it's not recorded in the test? Yeah, well, it's really hard to have a conversation if you're not looking at somebody, Chris, and that will show up in the recording no matter what. Yeah, it'll even sound like you're talking to the table, right? You'll be talking downwards, shall we say. So anything that can help you, like actually creating rapport. Okay, you can't create rapport with somebody if you're not looking at them. It's very, very difficult. Yeah. Yeah, like in the real world, Carito, you need to, one of the great skills of communication or skills of speaking is listening as much as speaking, right? Okay. Okie dokie, let's have a little look. If you run out of words, Pam, it's very unlikely in 5 minutes, to be honest. You have reasonably complex, well, not complex, but you have reasonably detailed context to deal with. If you run out of words, you should respond, and you should also ask the patient if they need to know anything. Typical strategies like that, yeah? All right, let's move on to have a little look at the task. So we're going to do a little micro task here, yeah? Looking at the skill of stress, okay? And we're going to work on, it's a sub-skill of pronunciation, stress, actually. Okay, so contrastive stress. We'll look at a task card at the end and we'll chat about some of these things, yeah? So let's do a task together. Let's do a little activity, all right? Just to give you something to do. Okay, so different stress patterns. So what does stress mean? And this is part of intelligibility. Different stress patterns are used in sentences to help listeners identify key information, okay? So stress is really, really important. If your stress is off or you don't stress anything, listeners have a very hard time knowing what it is they're meant to hear, okay? Everything seems the same. So contrast of stress is used to highlight specific information in contrast to something else, okay? We're going to see a couple of examples of that. All right. In the next activity, you'll listen to sentences and identify which piece of information is being highlighted. Okay, now I just need to quickly share my audio as usual. Sorry about that. Oopsie. Do that every time, don't I? Okay, so we're going to do a little activity and I want to point out some of the aspects of stress, yeah? Hi, Jay. What's up, bro? Hopefully, I'm enjoying it. Alrighty, my friends, so here's a little task for us. What I want you to do is listen to this little example. It's very short, but I've got it twice here, okay? I want you to listen to this example sentence and decide which word is stressed, okay? That's the hard one, that's the sentence there.
It's hard to stop smoking. It's hard to stop smoking.
So which word can you hear?
It's hard to stop smoking.
Which is the stressed word, the longest and the loudest word, if you like? Feel free to share in the chat. Hard, good. Yeah, it is not stressed, but it leads to the most stressed word. That's right. Supreetha's got it. Very good. Zara's got it. Hard, nice and clear. So that word is stressed, all right? So that's a technical, that's a clear example of the technical term stress. And you can hear it. It's slightly louder, slightly clearer, slightly longer, okay? Why? Because they want to actually tell us that it's hard, all right? But here we're going to do a little interesting practice, yeah? Good, everyone's got it. Joseph's got it. Elvin's has got it. Nice. All right, remember what I'm saying here, guys, is this is not so much all you need to know. This is something you need to think about in your own speaking. And of course, I also would like you to become more aware of it when you hear other people speak, okay? All right, so there's a little follow-up task here, though, and some of you have already answered that. So if that's the first sentence, it's hard to stop smoking. Which of the following, A or B, is the most appropriate response? Feel free to tell me what you think. Have a little look in my chat and see what you think. Very interesting. So we've got a lot of choices for B. No, and Christine's got A, and who else have we got? Heber's got A. Interesting. All righty. The power of an example. All right, so let me just tell you, my friends, the most appropriate response is A, okay? And we're just going to have a little look at a number of examples here so you can take some time to think about it. So when we talk about contrast of stress, okay, we are contrasting the word hard, which is stressed, with the idea that it's not impossible, okay? So it's hard, but it's not that hard, is another way to think about it, all right? So we're going to have a look at a couple of examples together, and Jay's broken down this task nice and clearly, but let's have a little look at the answer. Because the stress is on hard, this contrasts with impossible, okay? So the speaker is literally contrasting this idea, really, really difficult, with the idea of not impossible, right? So the answer is it's hard to stop smoking, but it's not impossible. So you can see similarly, the word impossible in this sentence would also be stressed, all right? And this is a really important thing. It's called pronunciation, if you like, but actually you can see now that the skill is here is all about meaning, okay? It's one of the bigger challenges in this whole aspect of language, okay? So if the stress were on stop, okay, and this is the answer to why not be that many of you are asking, I'm sure, okay? If the stress were on stop, then this would contrast with cut down, okay? Because stop means completely stopping, obviously, and cutting down means reduce, okay? And the answer would be, and I'll say it for you so you can get a sense of it. It's hard to stop smoking, right? So it's hard to do it, actually. It's hard to stop smoking, but you can try cutting down, all right? And you can see here the stress is on those two ideas which are actually contrasted in meaning, okay? So I can read those two sentences for you again. It's hard to stop smoking, but it's not impossible, okay? And the second one would be, it's hard to stop smoking, but you can try cutting down, okay? And these two concepts are contrasting, and the stress was there to indicate it, all right? And this, I think, again, remember, guys, we're not trying to teach you, we're trying to make you aware that this is one of the functions in language of this particular skill, okay? Both of the sentences are beautiful, all right, but the stress is different, okay? Oops, here we go. So let's have a little look at a couple of other examples now. I've got 9 examples, actually. All right, so what I'm going to do, you see, guys, I'm going to play you a sequence of audio, and you can see, you're going to hear, did you see the doctor today? Have you noticed any change recently? I'm not stressing anything here, okay? I'm going to play the audio, and all I want you to do, guys, is I want you to listen to the sequence. You'll hear each of these bolded sentences twice, okay? And I want you to listen, and I want you to decide which of the words in these little phrases, they're either questions or phrases, is actually, shall we say, is stressed, excuse me, okay?
Did you see the doctor yesterday? Did you see the doctor yesterday?
Have you noticed any change recently? Have you noticed any change recently?
We haven't seen a big improvement yet. We haven't seen a big improvement yet.
We may not be able to remove the whole tumour. We may not be able to remove the whole tumour.
I think it's getting better. I think it's getting better. Your blood pressure's up a bit. Your blood pressure's up a bit.
These tablets should help. These tablets should help.
The physio gave me some exercises. The physio gave me some exercises.
My nausea's getting worse. My nausea's getting worse.
Yeah, so just feel free to share your answers, guys. I'll take a bit of time. Good. Well, Jay, you've seen the answers before, mate. Do you want to listen again? Let's play it again, and you can have a little listen again and check your answers are complete.
Did you see the doctor yesterday? Did you see the doctor yesterday?
Have you noticed any change recently? Have you noticed any change recently?
That one's pretty flat.
We haven't seen a big improvement yet. We haven't seen a big improvement yet.
We may not be able to remove the whole tumour. We may not be able to remove the whole tumour.
I think it's getting better. I think it's getting better. Your blood pressure's up a bit. Your blood pressure's up a bit.
These tablets should help. These tablets should help.
The physio gave me some exercises. The physio gave me some exercises.
My nausea is getting worse. My nausea is getting worse.
I hope you can hear some of the musicality involved here, yeah? It's about rhythm as well. Okay, I like it. Let's have a little look at some of your ideas. Lots and lots of comments, which is fun. I'll show you the answers in just a sec. I like what I'm seeing both in YouTube and in the Zoom chat. Very good. Let's just go to the next page and you can have a little look and we can just compare. Okay. So already we can see most of you are picking up these ones. Did you see the doctor yesterday? Okay. And remember, the C is going to be contrasted with another concept or another word, if you like, that's going to be stressed in the response. Okay. Very good. I like it. Lots of you are picking up. C. Have you noticed any change recently? That one's quite flat. It's a fairly classic Australian accent, actually. I can say that, I guess, because I'm a Kiwi. But the change is certainly stressed. It's probably the most subtle. We haven't seen a big improvement yet. And notice here, guys, it is slightly longer, slightly louder, and it also allows us to, I don't really like the term, but it allows us to cram some of these sounds together. So that sentence is a nice example. We haven't seen a big improvement yet. We don't go, we haven't seen a big improvement yet. We go, we haven't seen a, okay? And that's very, it's relatively rapid. And then we go big improvement yet, okay? And it indicates that we're going to contrast it with something, yeah? And it's very nice. These phrases are also very useful, yeah? Okay, so here's our answers. Did you see the doctor yesterday? Have you noticed any change recently? We haven't seen a big improvement yet. We may not be able to remove the whole tumor. I think it's getting better. It's quite a common pattern, that one. I think, or something like that. Your blood pressure's up a bit. Okay, nice and clear, short word in its nature. Okay, these tablets should help. Okay, think about that. That's a lovely example that you could probably use a lot, actually. Or this tablet, or the tablets. Okay. What else have we got there? The physio gave me some exercises. Okay, it's probably more common to hear people say, well, I've done some exercise. Okay, my nausea is getting worse. All right, stress on the my there. Okay, all righty. Another little task for you guys. All right, so you can see that A, B, and C in each of these examples are, if you like, a response or the appropriate response, okay? I just want you to look through now. I'm happy to play the audio again if you'd like to check through it again. Remember, it's a very subtle skill, this, guys, okay? I would like you to, I'll play the audio again, but what I would like you to do is I'd like you to look at these phrases, listen to them again, but I want you to decide from options A, B, or C, what's the most appropriate response or, if you like, the most appropriate continuation of this of the sentence. Sorry.
Did you see the doctor yesterday? Did you see the doctor yesterday?
Have you noticed any change recently? Have you noticed any change recently?
We haven't seen a big improvement yet. We haven't seen a big improvement yet.
We may not be able to remove the whole tumour. We may not be able to remove the whole tumour.
I think it's getting better. I think it's getting better. Your blood pressure's up a bit. Your blood pressure's up a bit.
These tablets should help. These tablets should help.
The physio gave me some exercises. The physio gave me some exercises.
My nausea is getting worse. My nausea is getting worse.
All right, so I'll show you the answers now, my friends. I don't have a heck of a lot of time to go through it. Let's have a little look together. Here's the answers, and I'll read them out for you. It might be easier. Okay. Did you see the doctor yesterday? No, I spoke to her on the phone. Spoke again becomes the contrast. All right, so you've got a difference between visiting in person or seeing in person and speaking on the telephone. Did you see the doctor yesterday? No, I spoke to her on the phone. Okay, nice and high spike on spoke, if you'll excuse the pun. Have you noticed any change recently? No, I think it's about the same. Okay, no, I think it's about the same. Change and the same, basically, or the same. We haven't seen a big improvement yet, but even a small increase is encouraging. Okay, so we've got a contrast, very classic contrast between big and small there. We may not be able to remove the whole tumor, but I'm hopeful that we can. Okay, we may not be able to remove the whole tumor, but I'm hopeful that we can. Can is the stress there. Okay, with may not. I think it's getting better, but we'll see what the test results say. Your blood pressure's up a bit, so it's good that you came to see me. Okay, interesting example. Nice clear up, very short word, of course. These tablets should help. So stop taking the other ones. Direct contrast between these tablets and the others. Okay, these tablets should help. So stop taking the other ones. The physio gave me some exercises, but I think I can do more. More is the final one there, yeah? My nausea is getting worse, but Sam's has stopped. My and Sam are the direct contrast there, yeah? So you can see here, guys, what's at stake is the information we're communicating, much more, in fact, than our pronunciation, yeah? So as I said to you, what I want you to do is not so much take away these models, although this is a nice model of language that you may use, of course, but begin to think about how it is that you're using things like stress, okay? So in each of these examples, you can see that there's significant meaning and slightly longer, if you like, louder pronunciation of these core concepts, yeah? Okay. Sam is somebody's name, okay? So it's the contrast between myself and another person, okay? Good question, speaking, sorry. So yeah, the contrast here in the question was, what does Sam mean? Sam is a person's name, okay? Actually, it can be a man or a woman, yeah? In question 6, so Pam has asked, what's the, yeah, it's an interesting one. So it's not down, okay? So it's good, basically good, okay? So it's good that you came to see me, okay? So we've got up and then good, right? So the person has got some bad news, if you like, higher blood pressure, yeah? Yeah, no, it's not their direct opposites, okay? It's the contrast in meaning from the speaker, yeah? All right, so it's a nice question, Pam. So Pam's asking about 6, where we don't have a conceptual opposite. The opposite of up is down, of course. All right, the contrast is between your blood pressure is up or higher, and it's good you are here, okay? Yeah, it's a nice question though, buddy. And so let's be clear about that. The contrast here is in the meaning of the speaker, yeah? Yeah, well, the contrast though for A, Linda, would be with should, yeah? Because we're contrasting modality and potentiality, yeah? That's right. Contrast is the contrast in the intended meaning. So Carito has asked, why can't, and let's be clear here, we're not talking about perfect rules, we're talking about meaning. Carito has asked about question 6 and said, why not B? If you wanted to use contrastive stress for question 6, and have the answer be, or the response be B, you would have to stress blood pressure, Kaito. Your blood pressure's up a bit, but your heart rate is normal, okay? Because actually what you're contrasting is blood pressure and heart rate, yeah? So you absolutely can, as long as your stress is right in the first one, okay? Because you have to put this into context. We don't, of course, speak in single little phrases like this. What we do is we have these in the context of a longer conversation, yeah? So if you don't stress blood pressure and contrast it with heart rate, they'll be thinking, well, what's up a bit? Okay, so that's the idea. But Carito, you can, but the contrast would be between blood pressure and heart rate, not between up and normal, okay? But the answer is yes. And question 6, you stress good, because up is bad, yeah? Or not good, if you like. It's a tough one, that one. It's the hardest one. Two in it. Not hard, actually, but here it's the meaning, yeah? Not the actual concept. So we're not dealing in opposites, we're dealing in contrast, yeah? So because your blood pressure is up, it's bad or dangerous, I guess you might say. And the contrast is with the fact that the person has gone to the doctor, yeah? Why these exercises for speaking, Rosa? Because this is what we do when we speak. It's pronunciation. Now, contrast doesn't mean opposite. Well, it means the intended opposite meaning, yeah? Okay, so let's move on now, my friends, and move on to another little task, yeah? So somebody at the beginning asked about the difference between the old OET and the new OET, and here is the actual difference here, not in the task itself, but in the way that your performance is rated, yeah? Okay, and they have added a whole new set of what we call criteria, and they are clinical communication criteria, all right? So what I want to point out, though, and what I did point out at the beginning, is that these criteria come from medical communication training, not from language as such, all right? They have been changed slightly, I guess, but you are also scored against 5 clinical communication criteria: relationship building. So really, if you think about things like eye contact, okay, even though you can't see them, even though they can't see you when they listen to the recording, you're clearly not going to build a very strong relationship with a person you never look at, right? That's just a matter of fact, yeah? Understanding and incorporating the patient's perspective. If you think about Carito's earlier question about listening, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to understand and definitely incorporate the patient's ideas and thoughts if you're not actually listening to them, okay? So again, that really highlights that this is a simulation of a real conversation. Providing structure is one of the big challenges, and it's probably, I guess, most usefully, it's the greatest use of the card. The card gives you, if you like, bullet points, and you can move through the bullet points to help you provide structure, okay? But don't rush through the bullet points, because you run the risk of not doing the other things here, like understanding and listening, okay? And then information gathering and giving, fairly intuitive, I think, guys, because it's often about asking and answering questions, okay? And also providing explanations, all right? Each of these is scored out of 3. So you can see, I hope, that the linguistic criteria are slightly more, the task is weighted towards the linguistic criteria slightly more heavily, okay? We're going to have a little look at information giving, and this is going to allow us to have a closer look at a card as well, a role card. Okay, let's have a think about information giving. We're going to just have a little quick practice at explaining and describing. This really crosses over into appropriateness as well. All right, we've got a quick task, only 3 minutes. Don't need to take too long. Yeah. So in the OET speaking test, it's important that you explain things clearly in a way that patients can understand. Okay. Definitions can be provided in lots of different ways, obviously. Okay. So a papilloma is a small harmless lump usually found on the skin. Okay, so you can see we've got a technical term there, one that many of you probably share a knowledge of, but if you're explaining it to a patient, or many patients anyway, a small harmless lump usually found on the skin is going to help them understand it better, okay? A phlebotomist is someone specially trained to take blood, okay? Rather wonderful word, phlebotomist, isn't it? But it is just true to say that there are some people in the world who don't know what one of those things is, okay? And halitosis is another way of saying bad breath. So here you can see in each of these definitions, if you like, we've got a contrast between a technical term, or jargon sometimes we call it, and a more everyday explanation. Halitosis is bad breath. Phlebotomists take blood, etc. Okay, big part of it, part of your explaining or information giving is about doing this. You can also see, I hope, that this crosses over quite significantly with the idea of appropriateness. Okay, what I'm hearing from a lot of people who've done the test already is that quite often the interlocutor will ask, will say something like, sorry, can you explain that? It's probably a really nice time for you to reflect on how technical you are being with your language and to take some time to explain a little bit more carefully and a little bit more generally, shall we say. So in the next task, you're going to practice using more everyday language to explain some medical terms, okay? You're not there to show them your medical knowledge in a sense. You're there to show them your capacity to transmit that medical knowledge to a more general audience, to people like me, basically, and others, non-medical specialists, if you like. Okay, we've got a little task here. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Move that out of the way if I can, actually up here. Now, so you can see the instructions are nice and simple. I want you to match each of these terms, CVA, splint, etc., with the phrase that could be used to define them in more simple terms, okay? Nice and straightforward. I'll give you 3 minutes. You don't need to share your answers in the chat. You can just have a little write on a piece of paper if you prefer, and then we'll have a little look at the answers, okay? Okie dokie, guys, let's have a little look. So the point here is not about the terms. Any given context, any given role card that you get may require or have different words like this involved in them. The point is to use the blue to try to describe these things, okay? So you guys all know these things. In fact, I guess so do I, but not everybody does. And as we see quite often in the OET speaking test, the interlocutor, even if they do know what they are, is going to say that they don't, okay? So you need to be very, very sensitive to the need to talk in an ordinary way, okay? So mucus is the stuff that comes out of your nose when you've got a cold. Is the stuff that is the phrase that I really want you to think about. Stuff being a lovely general noun for everything, right? A cardiac sonographer is someone who specializes in taking ultrasound images of the heart. You may even need to describe what ultrasound is. A defibrillator is a machine used to give an electric shock to the heart to restore a normal heart rate, okay? Simple definitions that allow the person who is not a technical specialist to understand. Incontinence is what we call it when urine leaks out of your bladder, okay, uncontrolled. A splint is a device to support a limb and stop it from moving. So the reason I put this task in here, guys, is because I'm hearing, like I said, from a lot of people who are doing the test that the interlocutors are often saying, sorry, can you explain that a bit more? Or can you tell me what that is? I don't know what that is, okay? So I think one of the things you should be aware of is trying to do it before you get asked that, okay? CVA stands for cerebrovascular incident, which is another way of talking about stroke. So as I said, guys, I want to highlight the blue language, right? Lovely set, simple phrases for explaining things more generally. An otoscope is a special tool for looking into the ear. Saliva is a liquid produced in the mouth that helps us swallow and digest food. I would hope that most people know what saliva is, but I thought I'd put it in there anyway. Hemorrhoids are like really powerful structure. You're comparing what a known thing with an unknown thing. Hemorrhoids are like varicose veins inside your anal canal. Patella is the medical term for kneecap, okay? And that's probably a really great example. Many of you might naturally just choose the word patella because you're used to speaking to fellow medical specialists, okay? But obviously kneecap is the more general term. So this fits explanation, description, and of course, appropriacy. Delirium tremens describes what may happen when someone with an alcohol addiction when they stop drinking, sometimes called the shakes, actually. And emetics are substances that you take to cause vomiting, okay? Again, what you need to be aware of, my friends, is don't assume that everybody knows what these words mean, okay? You may use them if you find yourself using them because they're on the card, for example, or the cards are not very technical, okay, because they're not testing your medical knowledge. Make sure that you use one of these simple strategies to give more information, okay? You'll be doing lots of things. You'll be showing appropriacy, but you'll also be demonstrating a range of vocabulary and grammar as well, okay? Alrighty, so again, a consciousness raising task. There's no evidence to suggest any one of these words is going to come up, okay? It's about, yeah, good, Rose. So it's a withdrawal symptom, right? Oh, Carito's asked a good question. Carito, you're never talking to another medical professional, okay? You're always speaking to, the interlocutor is always pretending to be a patient or a caregiver of a patient, not a nurse, okay? So you're not referring, so don't confuse it with the writing task where you might be writing to a fellow professional, and typically you are, okay? You are always talking to somebody like a patient or a non-specialist, shall we say. Okay, so it's a good question, Carito. Okay, all right, a couple of things. Here's a little message from lovely Jay. If you want to find out more in detail about the speaking scoring criteria, the language ones and the clinical communication, Jay's done a couple of nice little videos which explain them in greater detail. They are quite technical, but it's very much worth your while looking at these. Okay, particularly because you might be able to ask somebody like Jay or myself or one of the E2 teachers what they mean, all right, in relation to your performance, okay? All righty, let's finish off by having a look at one of the role play cards, okay? this will, I hope, make some of this make sense to you. Here's a little role play card, and here is a task. We've got 6 very general questions here. We've got a sample medicine role play card. Remember here, guys, it doesn't really matter if you're a nurse, a physiotherapist, a dentist, or a doctor, etc. The techniques are going to be the same here. You should ask yourself these very, very general questions because they're designed to, in a sense, allow you to think about the context you are in. Okay, so I'll give you 3 minutes, guys, to have a look at through this card and to answer these questions. Okay. Okay, good. So let's just recap. So the interlocutor will give you the role play card and it'll look like this. Okay, at the top it will say your profession. Okay, make sure it is the correct one. Okay, then they will say that you have time for planning and preparation. Okay, 2 to 3 minutes is what they say. In that 2 to 3 minutes, this is the sort of thing you should do. You should ask yourself, where is this consultation? Okay. Why? Because when the role play begins, which is also controlled by the interlocutor, you will have to, in a sense, pretend that's where you are. So in this case here, most of you have picked it out, you're in a suburban clinic. You're not in a busy hospital ward. You're not at somebody's home, etc., etc. Okay? You need to ask who you are speaking to. Okay? And you should ask as a natural follow-on question, how old is the patient, or how old is the person you're speaking to, possibly as well, if that information is there. What's the condition or the diagnosis or the problem? Okay. What emotions are mentioned? Often there is emotion, but not always. Okay. But it's an important, useful question because, again, if an emotion is mentioned, like we see here today, this is going to affect your language choices, or it must. Okay. And then, of course, the more general question, anything else. All right. So this is the beginning of that. So Fatih, you've asked some questions. This is not an examiner. So Fatih has said, should I wait for the examiner to ask questions? Please don't confuse this test with IELTS, okay? It's radically different. You are in control here. The interlocutor is there to speak with you, okay? All right, so they're not going to ask you any questions, all right? When the role play begins and the interlocutor will ask you or tell you when to start, you should really begin straight away, okay? So let's just have a little look at the answers so that we can think about it. So in this context, in this role play or scenario, as we often call it, you are in a suburban clinic. You're speaking with the parent of a patient. So if we can just think back to one of the earlier questions, here we don't know the gender of the parent, but if you're speaking to a male interlocutor, clearly it's the daddy. If you're speaking to a female interlocutor, clearly it's the mum, okay? So you're speaking to a parent and you're speaking about a young child who has asthma, okay? And very importantly, in this scenario, we can see fear and anxiety, which is pretty normal. Most of you who are medical practitioners have probably experienced this in someone's mum or dad, feeling afraid of their young child being sick. The young person's name is Matthew, okay? Not the person you are speaking to though, the patient, all right? And 2 days earlier, they presented at the emergency department with signs and symptoms of asthma, okay? So we've got a visit to a suburban clinic as, in a sense, a follow-up from an asthma attack for a young person. Pretty common in some parts of the world, yeah? So this is what you are talking about in your role play, okay? So you are, in this case, a doctor, a GP, I guess you might think, okay? Speaking to this parent, who is a little bit anxious for their young man who has got asthma for the first time, okay? Really, really significant. If a person is afraid or anxious, clearly you must change your language, okay? So somebody said, how do we do relationship building? Well, one of the things we do when we're building rapport and making people trust and believe us is we respond to their emotions, okay? So the simple question to how do we build relationships is we say hello and we are polite and respectful, but the follow-up answer is that we respond to aspects of their feelings in a way that makes them feel better, okay? Obviously, using the young man's name here, Matthew, is going to be significant because it shows respect, okay, and it shows care, all right? Also responding to the fact that they had an emergency a couple of days earlier. Many of us have been parents, I think. I certainly have, and I've been to an emergency department with one of my children when they had breathing problems. It's quite common in New Zealand where I come from. I felt terrible about it. I felt nervous. I felt anxious, okay? Your job is to respond to that in a very natural, caring, and professional way, all right? That's the job, yeah? The child is not there, Zeph. So Zeph's asked a lovely question, okay? So Zeph has said, Craig, in this situation, there are two people, the parent and the child. Is it also okay to talk or interview the child? Zeph, you can't, okay? This is one of the differences between the real world and the, if you like, the scenario we've got here. The only person who is there is the parent, okay? So you can refer to Matthew, all right? But clearly you can't talk to Matthew, okay? It's a nice question, mate, but yeah, there's only one person to speak to, okay? Joseph's got, hi Craig, how to know if you're in a suburban clinic or in the hospital? Well, it says it always here. So this part of the task card is always the same, Joe. So you have setting and it tells you where, all right? If you're in an emergency situation, your language again is going to be slightly different. Clearly Matthew has been treated by the emergency department, okay? He was treated with a nebulized salbutamol, as you would often get, I guess, in these cases, yeah? But this is 2 days later, Joseph, and they're going to see, when we say suburban clinic, we mean probably their own doctor or a GP, because Matthew has been treated, he's had this issue, but he needs ongoing treatment, right? Okay, so you're obviously going to be slightly less urgent in that response, yeah? But many of the things you say will be the same, okay? No, it's not. Sorry, Nabil. I'll talk to Jay about that. Maybe we can reduce the size for next time. Okay. Typically, Jay and I are trying to use most of the slide, but we can have a little chat about that. Thanks for telling us. Yeah. I think some people do and some people don't. It's a little bit across the devices, I think. I'm not sure why, but I'll try to do something about it for next time. Yeah. Okay. So you're only talking to the parents. A good question, Zeph. Yeah, that's good, Shwana. Asthma is a lovely example where you're going to explain it. And let me just push on to the next part I wanted to bring up. Okay, so here's another little task that Jay and I put together. It's a follow-up task. Have a look again at the same scenario. Okay, and I just want you to identify quickly the key verbs. The verbs are the words that tell you what to do. You can write them in the chat if you like, my friends. I'll show you and we'll have a little chat about it. Okay, let's have a little look at the highlights. So you can see, my friends, this is really the task. Okay, and so Shwana asked a really, really great question. She said, Craig, can I say asthma is the condition where the airways to the lungs narrow? Clearly you can do that, Shwana. And you can see that the card gives you a bit of help here, all right, because they're not testing your medical knowledge. So in the unlikely event that any of you didn't know what asthma was, which is not really going to happen, right, you can just use that information. My suggestion is that you explain it as much as you feel like in that context, right? So I mean, you might even think narrowing of the airways in the lungs doesn't really explain everything. So you might normally say, well, so what that means is that the child or the person with asthma feels like they can't get enough oxygen, so they have breathing troubles, right? So again, absolutely, Shwana, you should and you can see that the task is asking you to do that, okay? Which is why I created that little explanation description task today. Very good. So I can see everyone's getting it. So we've got explain, describe, okay? Shortness of breath, wheezing. Wheezing is that sound that you make when it feels like there's something in your throat or there's fluid in your chest or whatever. You guys are probably better off explaining it than me, right? Because you have both technical knowledge and if you like ordinary knowledge, right? So you're showing your language, you're showing your ability to go from very, very technical terms, these are not particularly technical, to talking about it in a more ordinary way. So these verbs, they help you guys. The information in the middle is not very, very new to you. You're all doctors in this case, for example, right? And so you know this stuff, but these are functions. These are things that allow you to perform actions. So you can see explain comes twice actually, but it's punctuated by describe. Okay, and we can see describe symptoms, explain management, how do we do with it, how do we control the environment, etc. Triggers, reassure, of course, because we know that this parent is naturally nervous, okay, and anxious, okay. And then, of course, we've got support as well. So you're offering support, another way that you show rapport and build relationships, right? Okay. So you've got to do what they ask, all right? And the more that you can get through it, you're not assessed according to whether or not you get through the whole task, okay? But a really, really simple way to read the task and to use that preparation time is to focus on functions, all right? So Shwana, the answer to your question is yes. And in fact, to perform really well in this task, you would absolutely explain in very, very nice, clearly understandable terms what asthma is and what happens when a young person or any person gets it, okay? So this is, in a sense, our guidance for how you use the planning time, okay? So how are you going to kick off this particular scenario? Well, clearly, you're going to say hello. You're going to say, I understand that young Matthew had an asthma attack 2 days ago or so, and you were in an emergency department. Okay, and then you might say, well, so do you know much about asthma? What do you understand what asthma is? And they'll probably go, no. Okay, and then you'll say, well, let me explain a little bit about asthma. Asthma is when the airways or the passages that take oxygen to our lungs or airs to our lungs, they become very narrow. And what this means is that the person with asthma feels a little bit like they can't get enough oxygen. They have trouble breathing. So you probably noticed that about Matthew. And then you just talk in the normal way, my friends, yeah? The way that you would if you were really speaking to a mother or father whose young child had newly had asthma recently, okay? And then at certain points, you're not going to spend all your time explaining asthma. You're going to ask them if they've understood, if they'd like to know anything else, because that incorporates their perspective, etc. And then at some point when it's natural in this 5 minutes, you're going to move on to, of course, talk about how you're going to help Matthew not have terrible asthma attacks and have to go to emergency again. And that's going to be things like dust. It might be things like cold air. It might be diet. Of course, it might be things like salbutamol and all of those kind of common medicines or inhalers, yeah? Okay, so this is what you do. All right, so that's our guide. Couple of general strategies that we always think about. Big one here, my friends, treat the role play as if you were with a real patient, okay? So you think about all of the things you've said. With a real patient, you would listen to them a little bit at the right times. You would also know when to move on. With a real patient, you would clearly be looking at them, okay? Keeping eye contact, etc. These are the things you need to do, yeah? It's a hard one. It's like when we were children and we pretended. Allow time to establish a relationship with the patient and ask for relevant information. So you might ask in this scenario, can you tell me a little bit more about what happened to Matthew? What do you know what caused the breathing? Was he out late at night? Anything like that, okay? Using your knowledge in a sense of what might trigger an asthma attack. Has he had a cold? That sort of a thing. Remember that the assessor is testing your ability to communicate effectively with patients in English. They're not testing your medical knowledge. So one of the questions that came up in YouTube was, can we add our own information? The best general advice is don't, okay? You've got enough information on the card. You've got enough of the context here for 5 minutes of general conversation. They're not testing your medical knowledge, so don't start talking about technical things outside of the card. You run a serious risk of saying something that might be too difficult to understand and isn't really pertinent to the speaking part of this particular task, okay? Pay attention to the type of information you need to communicate to the patient and adjust the way you communicate this information for different situations. That's appropriacy, yeah? If the patient's being given bad news, for example, you have to show empathy and kindness, right? None of us in the real world wouldn't do that if somebody was really being given bad news. So going up here, if it says that this person's getting bad news, you need to demonstrate that you know how to do that in the real situation, okay? Don't memorize long answers, okay? This is really also related to the requests that I often get for how do I say hello? How do I introduce myself? Okay, really for any of you listening here in YouTube or in E2, if I say, you know, how do you introduce yourself? You say, hi, my name is Craig, right? Okay, or hi, I'm Dr. So-and-so. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about Matthew's asthma. Very, very uncomplicated, okay? So again, get away from thinking there's model answers. OET has said that if they think the response is memorized, they won't assess it. Okay, that doesn't mean they'll ignore everything, but if they think large parts of it have been scripted, all they'll do actually is they'll just ignore it, which will reduce the sample they have for your performance, which will probably reduce your score. Use varied vocabulary which matches the needs of the patient, again, like we looked at today, in the context of the role play, okay? So varied vocab here is going to be about explanations of non-technical explanations of asthma and inhalers and things like that, and maybe environmental triggers, and also perhaps using a variety of kind of tones and language which make the person feel a little bit less nervous, and anxious about their young man. You need to show you can communicate with the patient in a variety of ways, and there are 2 role plays, remember, so you're not going to communicate in the identical way because you're speaking to a different person. Speak loudly, clearly, and confidently so the interlocutor can hear you. Obviously, you're going to be feeling nervous on the day, guys, but put on your loudest and clearest and most confident voice. Loudly, of course, depends a little bit on the scenario. Pronounce words as clearly and correctly as possible. We did a little bit of pronunciation work today, obviously looking at stress and the power that it has for meaning. Vary your intonation. Your voice should rise and fall as a matter of fact, okay? Start to listen to speakers of English and that slightly rhythmic and musical aspect of their language, and reflect on your own speech. Does that do that same type of thing when you're speaking English? Not in your mother tongue, of course. Read the role play card extremely carefully, I should add, so you don't misunderstand or miss out on any of the topic, and of course the help that it gives you. Underline keywords and phrases on the card, just the keywords and phrases, yeah? Don't underline too much. Okay, it's a big mistake. If you underline too much, you're underlining everything. When you look at the card, which you will need to do from time to time, you don't see what it is that's meant to stand out. You see everything and it becomes hard to choose. And that's the moment when people often read, okay? And it's not a reading test. Make brief notes if you want to for each point on the card. So in the example that we saw today, you might say narrowing of airways or something like that as a nice note. Asthma is, okay? Something really, really simple like that. Not full sentences, again, because if you write full sentences, you'll read, not speak, okay? Definitely, this one's really important. Ask the interlocutor to clarify anything on the role play card which is unclear. So in your planning time, you're allowed to ask questions, okay? You can't ask questions when the role play begins. Okay, so if there's anything you're unsure about on that card, please just ask them. It's not a bad thing. In fact, it's a good thing for your performance. Okay, so you can include the meaning or the pronunciation of vocab or the context of the role play. If you're unsure about what a suburban clinic might actually means, they might say, oh, it's like a GP's office or something like that. They'll explain it to you. You cannot ask any questions once the role play begins because you are pretending that you're in that situation. Try not to be nervous, obviously, guys. I know that's hard. Take a deep breath, smile, make eye contact. There we are again as you begin your speaking task, okay? While eye contact is not assessed, it can help you feel more confident, right? Because you look the person in the eye. A couple of important things. You do not have to complete all of the tasks, okay? So if we go back quickly, guys, sorry to go back like this, but there's when the assessor looks or listens, excuse me, to your speaking, they're not going, oh, didn't do the last bullet point or didn't say support or something like that, right? You're trying to give a sample. So there's no expectation you complete absolutely everything. They want you to show your language with the help that the card gives, okay? So the most common error actually when we practice together in one-to-one speaking is that the candidate will rush through the cards and not really have a conversation, okay? Make choices. This is the big one, really. Make sure you make choices. Consider who you're speaking to and how that affects or impacts your choice of language, right? Who are they? What's wrong with them? How are they feeling, etc. Okay? This is a big one. It's all about you at that point. Balance speaking and listening, Carito. Yeah. Okay, so I told you there'd be a direct answer. Okay, listening probably more so at the beginning, obviously. And you are right that you need to produce a sample. So if you listen only, you will be in trouble. Respond to what the patient says. I really think that's the best advice. If the patient says, oh, little Matthew's been getting sick a lot recently, talk about that. Say, oh, really? Can you tell me about that? Is there anything that you've been doing differently that you think might be causing him to be sick so often, et cetera, et cetera? So, you know, again, really try to have as real a conversation as you can. Okay, and then there's a message from Jay. I'll just quickly take the chat and then we can bust off, yeah? All right. Let's just make sure I've got everyone's questions. Explain, reassure. Can describe, ensure. Good. Can one ask? Kim has got. Can one ask an initial question after reading the background that is not part of the task? Yeah, such as Kimas, I think you can. Yeah. You might say, oh, I understand Matthew went to emergency. How is he feeling now? Something like that would be very normal, and it would make a strong start, actually. Yeah, Jasmine, you can explain a little bit outside of the condition, but you don't need to go too far. You should really think about paraphrasing it. Yeah, good. Ensure that they've got an inhaler all the time, yeah? Carito, when you say, can we talk about, so Carito was asked, can we talk about religion or religious belief during the speaking task? I actually think, well, I think that it's not on the card. So it's a little bit like adding medical knowledge. And you would probably want to just think what the relevance of that is, yeah? One of the things I think that's quite interesting and maybe different between, say, some of the cultures you're planning to enter and the cultures you find yourself in is the presence of religion in what we call secular institutions. So public or government funded things like schools and hospitals and that. It's not that we don't approve of religion and we don't think it's an important part of many people's lives. It's just that it doesn't have a particularly sort of structural function there, yeah? So if a patient brings it up, absolutely. But as a matter of fact, from your perspective, Carito, probably not. If it's in the scenario, which it might be, because there might be religious beliefs, reasons, for example, to refuse certain types of treatment, then of course it's a topic, yeah? But just to bring it up as a matter of fact, probably not, Carito. So if it's in the role play card that religion is part of the context, yes. But if it's not, I would suggest no. Okay. Yeah, Geeta, that's a nice one. So Geeta said, can I tell them my experiencing while explaining for them? And I think in some cases, yes, Geeta. So Geeta's given a nice example. If they start talking about their mother being ill, can I relate their situation with mine and tell them how they must feel? Yeah, or tell them that you understand a little bit about how they feel, Geeta. That's a very important skill for empathy, yeah? It's quite often the case that we have similar experiences to some of the people we speak to. So it's a very, very strong way to build rapport, okay? So I think that that's a nice one. That's different to bringing in medical knowledge, yeah? So you're saying, yeah, look, I understand. It's really tough when your mother or your father's ill. My father was ill for a very long time. In that moment, you are being very human and you're connecting with them. So if you have that opportunity, Geeta, it's nice. And it is what we call empathy and it's rapport, yeah? Okay. Oh, sure. Sorry, Joseph. Yes. Where is it? This one here, yeah? Pam, I think if the interlocutor diverts to a question that's not part of the task, I would recommend you answer the question. Okay? Because we don't know what's on their card, okay? So on their card, they may in fact have guidance to talk about something that's not necessarily on yours. They have a card as well. So my feeling is that if the interlocutor takes it in a direction that that's not on your card, I would actually, I would honestly answer them directly, yeah, and speak to them about it. Yep. Yeah, Mustafa, I think you should ask a little bit about Matthew's situation, yeah? I think in the same way that you really would in the real world, you would say, can you tell me, does Matthew have, is he, I don't know, is there a lot of dust in the environment, or does he show any signs of allergies or whatever it might be, yeah? Yeah, I'm hearing a lot about a little difference in the interlocutors, Swan. I don't really know how to respond to that. They're meant to be there to help you, yeah? Yeah, good, Rose, that's right. Lovely questions like, how's he been? Is there any improvement since you visited emergency? What do you think causes this asthma, or what do you think caused the attack? It would be a perfect question. Well, the interlocutor is part of the task, Pam. Okay, honestly, I think the worst thing you can do is just drive through the task on your card and ignore what the interlocutor says. It's happened to me before, and basically it means you're not in a conversation. Okay, it means that you're just being controlled by the task. I actually think that's the kiss of death, if you'll excuse the term. Yeah, so I think that if the interlocutor says something, the interlocutor is not going to be just saying whatever they want. It's probably reflective of something on their card, honestly. So I would take my cues from the person I'm speaking to. Yeah, you can't actually. So Jenny's just made a really good point. In 5 minutes, it's going to be really difficult to do everything on the task card. because 5 minutes does go fast. And I think what that indicates is that the task is there to help you to produce a sample. Okay. The task is there to help you to produce a sample of language. But in many cases, if you rush through all of the things on the task card, you're really not achieving most of it. And in fact, you're probably not really demonstrating the strongest version of your language, actually. Yeah, Tyrone, you're across from them, so you can't really touch them or do any investigations, if you like, yeah? Okay, it's a good question, buddy, but not really, no. It's sort of, even though it might be appropriate in the real world, it's not really appropriate in the task, yeah? Yes, Karito, I think that's right. If you're a parent yourself, it's a very natural way to communicate with another parent, isn't it? Yeah, Mezzavine's asked a good question. She said, when I'm given the task card, will it be left in front of me after the task starts? Yes, it's your task card, okay? So you can hold it in your hand, you can keep it on the desk in front of you to refer, okay? They only take it from you at the end of the 5 minutes of the role play, okay? It's a good question, Mezzavine. Let's have a quick look at yeah, Mandalia, I think that's a fine question. Is there any family history, or does he have, yeah, other conditions like allergies and things like that? I think those are very natural questions to ask, yeah? Again, the card will give you a bit of help. Yeah, Jenny, I think you can. I think in the one that we looked at, the time is there, but you don't really have a lot of chance to focus on it, Cicera. Okay, so I would focus on the card if you want to move on, okay? Now, Notion, nice question, Notion. Warm-up questions, Notion's asked, are warm-up questions assessed? No, they are not. Rosa, the answer to the question, why don't you have to complete the task, the full task? You can, but it's not part of the assessment, right? So if we go back to, and again, a lot of you guys are thinking like IELTS, yeah? So let's go back to these criteria. So let's have a little look at this. We've got relationship building, understanding and incorporating patient's perspective, providing structure, information gathering, information giving. Those are the criteria, or one set of criteria that you are assessed against. Now let's look at the second set, the first set, or the other set, sorry, which are the linguistic criteria. Intelligibility, fluency, appropriateness, grammar, and expression. Nowhere in these 9 criteria does it say completes everything on the task card. Literally nowhere. Okay? The reason you might want to try to get through the task is to provide a broader sample of your language, yeah? Okay. Thank you, Zeph. That's very kind of you, mate. Happy Valentine's to you too, my friends. All right. So I want to make that clear. You are assessed against intelligibility. Can you be understood? Your fluency, the speed and rate of your speech and the flow, your choices of language here and the variety you show. And of course, these new criteria, which are about being friendly, polite, respectful, and building a rapport with the patient. Sorry, what's going on there? Okay, let's have a little look here. So you can see, oopsie, I went too far, didn't I? Nowhere does it say, does everything on the task, yeah? Now, Mary Cinderella, so they stop you after 5 minutes, okay? So you don't have a choice, okay? So that's a nice question. So Nemo's asked, so Mary Cinderella said, does it make any problem if I'm not complete my task in the correct time? No, basically try to get through it because you show a nice sample, but at the end of the 5 minutes, the interlocutor stops you. They say, that's the end of the role play. You can stop now. And you basically just stop. Okay, and then they give you a new card and you do it again. Okay. Esther has asked, does the interlocutor carry any assessment card during the speaking section? No, Esther, really, really important. I said this at the beginning, but I make it clear because it's not that obvious. The interlocutor doesn't assess you. The interlocutor has a card like yours, which says, if you think about our example today, it says something like, you are the parent of Matthew, who recently went to emergency with asthma. You are very anxious and nervous about how you're going to manage his asthma, etc. So they have information to help them pretend to be Matthew's mother or father, okay? Okay, so that's a lovely question too. All right, good, Rose. I'm glad you got it. All righty, my friends, I'm going to just log out of YouTube now, my friends. Nice to see you all. Hope it was helpful. Cool, Pam. Well, Alvans, I'll be surprised if you have no idea about what advice you should give, okay? And remember, there is a lot of information on the task card. So if you give a little bit of advice or you need content, there is content on the card. So if we look at this one here, let's just imagine that we did this one. You can see you've got trigger factors, you've got assess severity. So you can use that information. And in fact, I recommend you use that. Okay, but you have to put it into language that's yours, yeah? Okay, thanks, Mary Grace, nice to see you. Okay, what else have we got? Jasmine's asked, are the interlocutors from the UK, Australia, or American? Well, they're trained interlocutors, so they can be from multiple countries, my friend, but they have a high standard of English, yeah? So they don't have to be native speakers though, okay? They have to go through interlocutor training from OET. No, that's good. That's exactly right, Pam. So Pam's made a very important point. In conclusion, it's about communication assessment. It's not like task achievement in writing. And actually, even in the writing, they don't use the term task achievement exactly. They sort of do, but they really mean, have you chosen the right notes and communicated them clearly? Yeah, so that's a good point. It's different to the writing task, yeah, where you are, in a sense, being assessed on being asked what or doing what you're asked to do, yeah? Thanks, Mary Cinderella. Thanks, Nona. Nice to see you. Okay, I'm just going to stop the share for now. I'm going to come back on video. I'm going to say goodbye to my friends in YouTube. Take care, everybody. Nice to see you. Oh, sorry. Namo Kumar said, what do you mean by paraphrasing? Paraphrasing, Namo means saying things in your own words, I guess is the best way to say it, yeah? So using your own words or using different words to mean the same thing, okay? You might be familiar with the word synonym, okay? So we might say big and large, right? They mean in some contexts exactly the same thing, okay? But paraphrasing means using whole phrases or sentences to mean the same thing, okay? So you might say, Craig is a big man, or you might say, Craig is a large gentleman, okay? Possibly not true, I'm a gentleman, okay? Thanks, Goodwins, no worries, buddy. Nice to see you. Thank you, Esther. Thanks, Joyce. Take care, guys. See you next Wednesday if you're able to join, yeah? Nice to see you all.